Welcome to the deep dive. You know how sometimes you pick up a fantasy novel, maybe like Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, and you're just struck by this really confusing, contradictory, almost unsettling emotional world?
Hmm.
Well, imagine if that wasn't fantasy, but actually your childhood home.
Right.
Today, we're taking a deep dive into the complex, often bewildering world of mothers who suffer from borderline personality disorder, or BPD, and, crucially, the profound, lasting impact this has on their children.
Yeah, in this deep dive, we're really going to be digging into Christine Ann Lawson's book, Understanding the Borderline Mother.
Yeah.
It's quite powerful. Our mission really is to help you get a handle on the core characteristics of BPD in mothers, understand how these incredibly challenging relationships tend to unfold, and maybe most importantly, explore the paths to healing for adult children who've, well, lived through it.
Okay. So by the end of our chat, you should have a much clearer picture of these distinct fairy tale archetypes Lawson uses. They're quite vivid, aren't they? For the mothers and even their partners.
They really are.
Yes.
Helps make sense of things.
And we'll delve into the unique challenges their children face, who often develop these make-believe selves, as Lawson puts it, and hopefully discover some actionable steps adult children can take to build healthier relationships and maybe finally break those cycles of inherited pain. Okay, let's unpack this. What exactly is borderline personality disorder, clinically speaking?
Okay, so Lawson starts with the clinical definition. BPD is essentially a pervasive pattern of instability. Instability in relationships, self-image, emotions, and marked impulsivity.
Instability seems key.
It is. And what's really insightful about the term borderline itself is how it suggests this emotional state teetering right on the edge,
Yeah.
between psychosis and neurosis. This often flares up when they perceive abandonment or rejection, real or imagined.
And for a child living with that, what does that translate to?
Well, it means a profoundly contradictory and confusing emotional environment. Lawson points out that children under 3 are especially vulnerable because they just can't discern deception or, like, incongruence.
What do you mean by incongruent?
Like, a mother might feel one emotion inside, maybe anger or fear, but express something totally different on the outside, or mask hostility with a smile. For the child, it's like living in this borderland, constantly puzzled by these contradictions. Nothing quite lines up.
It sounds exhausting, constantly trying to figure out what's real. How does that instability, that unpredictability, show up most intensely? You mentioned it's not always obvious to everyone.
That's a really important point. The most intense symptoms, the extreme emotional intensity, the impulsivity, the unpredictability, and that deep consuming fear of abandonment, these are primarily seen by those in intimate relationships.
So family members, partners, children.
Exactly. Casual acquaintances, coworkers, maybe even neighbors. They rarely see the sudden mood shifts, the self-destructive behaviors, the paranoid distortions, or the obsessive thinking. It's often a very private storm brewing behind closed doors.
So it's not just emotional ups and downs, it's like a fundamental distortion of reality itself. That must make things incredibly confusing. How does this distortion of truth actually play out day to day?
Well, it's tricky because borderline mothers can genuinely distort the truth because their perceptions are distorted. Lawson gives this really powerful example of Laura's mother.
Okay.
Her mother interpreted a simple goodbye kiss between Laura and her ex-husband as sexual abuse. Now, this likely stems from the mother's own past trauma, but the effect on Laura was devastating.
I can imagine.
And this can lead to this awful cycle where the mother habitually lies or maybe misremembers things, rarely apologizes, and ends up convincing the children that they are the ones who are wrong or crazy, simply because, as Lawson puts it, she was always so convincing. The child's own reality gets constantly undermined.
And this distortion isn't just about the present moment, right? You mentioned it affects memory too. So it's not just like having a bad memory. It's almost an inability to process or integrate really intense emotional experiences, which means they keep repeating patterns.
Exactly. That sounds incredibly frustrating for a child just trying to make sense of their world.
It is. Borderline mothers often genuinely don't remember these intensely emotional events. And because they don't remember, they can't learn from the experience.
Oh.
Laura and her sister, for example, they clearly remembered their mother completely losing control over really trivial things. But when they brought it up years later, their mother denied it, flat out. Wow.
Famously saying something like, "How dare you say I did such things after all I've done for you?" This inability to recall, or perhaps this need to deny, also connects to what Lawson calls Annihilating rage. This is particularly linked to the witch mother archetype we'll discuss.
Annihilating rage. That sounds terrifying.
It is, and tragically, children of borderlines can sometimes internalize this rage so deeply that they feel this murderous rage themselves. Christina Crawford, Joan Crawford's daughter, actually wrote about wanting to kill her own mother. It shows the profound depth of that internalized anger and pain.
Okay, this brings us to one of the most, well, memorable parts of Lawson's work, these fairy tale archetypes. Why do you think she chose that framework, and how does it help us understand these dynamics?
I think she uses them as a lens, really, a way to categorize the main coping mechanisms and behaviors of mothers with BPD. Each archetype embodies a dominant emotional state, and that state profoundly impacts the children. It gives us a kind of shorthand, a way to grasp behaviors that might otherwise seem totally illogical.
Makes sense. So let's start with the first one, the waif.
Right. The waif. Her dominant emotion is helplessness, just overwhelming helplessness.
Helplessness. Okay, and how does that translate into her mothering and the impact on her kids?
Well, she tends to swing between being indulgent and negligent. On one hand, she feels totally undeserving of her children's love, so she might overcompensate with gifts, unlimited candy, that kind of thing. But crucially, she feels powerless to actually protect them.
So the indulgence isn't really about the child's needs?
Not fundamentally. And in extreme cases, she might even give up custody, framing it as the ultimate act of self-sacrifice. But for the child, it just feels like abandonment. Pure and simple.
That's heartbreaking. Are there typical things a waif mother might say?
Yeah, Lawson notes phrases like, "You'd be better off without me," or "I don't deserve your love," or even "don't need me because I can't help you," if it puts a tremendous burden on the child.
I can see how. And the long-term impact.
Children of waifs often struggle with authority figures later in life, or they might swing the other way and become compulsively self-sufficient, almost like little caregivers themselves. Lawson mentions Charlotte DuPont as an example, often lost in depression, described as a butterfly with a sting. She tragically died filled with despair over failing to protect her kids.
Such a heavy burden for everyone involved. Okay, moving from that intense helplessness, what's the next archetype Lawson identifies?
So from the waif's vulnerability, we shift to the hermit. And her dominant emotion is really different. It's fear, pervasive fear.
Fear. Okay, how does that manifest?
She's often quite superstitious, suspicious of the world, and plagued by countless phobias. Now, she might seem strong because she can tolerate being alone, maybe even prefers it, but that solitude doesn't actually ease her deep-seated anxiety. Her mind is filled with these persistent fantasies of harm, so her core message to her children becomes, life is just too dangerous.
Wow. And if your main caregiver constantly tells you life is too dangerous, the impact on a child trying to grow and explore must be huge.
Oh, absolutely. Children of a hermit mother are often deprived of normal opportunities to explore the world, to make mistakes, to learn naturally through experience. They tend to become anxious themselves, maybe struggle to concentrate in school, and they learn to be afraid, often without even really understanding what they're supposed to be afraid of.
It's like absorbing the fear by osmosis.
Exactly. Lawson mentions a patient, Cynthia, who reached a point where she screamed at her own mother, "Leave me alone," because her privacy was just constantly violated out of this misplaced fear. It's this feeling of never being safe, never having space, even in your own home.
Right. Okay, then we have the queen. Her dominant emotion, Lawson says, is emptiness. That sounds different again. How does emptiness drive her behavior?
She's described as mirror hungry, driven by this compulsive, insatiable need for attention and admiration from others. She's often trying to compensate for deep feelings of worthlessness, so she might put on these extravagant displays, wealth, success, achievements, and she can be intensely competitive, even with her own children.
So the children aren't seen as individuals.
Often not. They're viewed more as extensions of herself, pieces to be manipulated to reflect well on her, or sometimes even as potential rivals or enemies to be controlled or undermined.
So it's not just needing attention, it's about control too. Like a game of psychological chess where the kids are pawns. How does that show up day to day?
Absolutely. Control is huge. A key behavior you often see with the queen is these dramatic, almost theatrical, hysterical reactions. Lawson gives the example of Mary Toslink and her anxious attachment, leading her to scream, "Bobby will die," just because her son ate some lime.
Wow, that's extreme.
Or think about Joan Crawford. She rigidly enforced these completely unreasonable rules, yet her own moods swung wildly, leaving her daughter Christina constantly uncertain and on edge.
That sounds terrifyingly unpredictable.
It is. Christina even recalled her mother hanging up on her when she called, excited to share news about getting a TV role. Why? Because Joan was apparently intensely jealous of her career. For the child, it's not just an outburst. It's like being sucked into this emotional vortex where the mother's needs and dramas dictate everything.
So the child have to fight for any sense of self.
They really do. Lawson calls it a royal battle, just to win basic autonomy. And they often suffer from nervous exhaustion because of the constant interference and drama. If they dare to express their own needs, they're often accused of being selfish.
Okay, that's heavy. And finally, we get to the witch. Lawson says her dominant emotion is annihilating rage. This one sounds the most frightening.
It is, arguably. The witch is filled with this deep self-hatred, which she then projects outwards, often targeting one specific child as the scapegoat for everything wrong in her life. Her chilling message is essentially, life is war.
And she believes she's right.
Often, yes. She wields her power blindly, absolutely convinced she's just doing her job as a parent, even when her actions are incredibly destructive. This can include things like sexual abuse, public humiliation, searching through belongings, denying any privacy, playing cruel tricks like withholding something the child desperately wants.
And she denies her own destructiveness.
Completely. She projects her internal war onto the targeted child, making them the source of all the problems.
The examples Lawson gives for the witch archetype are just harrowing. Susan Smith drowning her children because her boyfriend was leaving her. Diane Downs shooting her 3 kids in the car.
Right. And 7-year-old Cheryl died instantly. The quote from her 9-year-old sister, Christy, is unforgettable. Why didn't anybody hear us screaming? It's just heartbreaking.
What is the long-term impact on children who survive that kind of environment? It's hard to even imagine.
Children of the witch often feel profoundly disconnected from life, almost internally dead. Lawson describes them as feeling trapped in a world of total domination. They learn very young not to feel, not to cry, not to laugh or smile. At least not in her presence. Some even report having dreams of concentration camps.
That's how extreme the control feels.
Yes, and failing to create significant distance as an adult can be truly disastrous. Lawson mentions the case of serial killer Edmund Kemper, who ultimately murdered his own abusive mother. It illustrates the extreme destructive potential when that dynamic isn't broken.
It's clear these mothers have a huge impact. But Lawson also emphasizes the father's roles, or often their lack of a role. How do they fit into these dynamics?
That's critical. Many of these fathers, Lawson suggests, were themselves left alone with their own pain as children. They learn to repress their own traumatic experiences.
So they can't recognize or respond to their own children's pain.
Often, yes. And this frequently results in them just failing to intervene. They don't protect the child from the mother's dysfunction. And that silence, that lack of protection, creates this unbearable confusion for the child. Who is supposed to keep them safe?
So let's look at the partners for each archetype. The waif, the helpless one, who does she typically partner with?
The waif often seeks out the frog prince. He's usually portrayed as an underdog, someone who evokes sympathy. The waif hopes deep down that he'll magically transform into Prince Charming.
How does he?
Rarely in this context. He's typically unable to provide the reliable emotional support the family needs, leaving the children feeling emotionally neglected. As Lawson puts it, the children often only ever see the frog. They never get the prince they desperately need.
It's a sad image. Okay, and the fearful hermit. Who is her partner?
The hermit often finds the huntsman. He's usually depicted as good-hearted, loyal, and often drawn to her apparent need for protection. But his main coping mechanisms are denial and avoidance.
So he just avoids conflict.
Pretty much. He distances himself. Lawson gives the example of Emily's father. When Emily would try to talk about her mother's issues, he'd just shut it down, saying, "There's nothing wrong with your mother." This leaves the child feeling completely invalidated and emotionally abandoned all over again.
Doubly abandoned, in a way. Then there's the king, the partner to the queen. I imagine that pairing is quite dramatic.
Oh, definitely. The king is often a prototypical narcissist himself, chosen by the queen for his status, prominence, wealth, power. Their relationship is often volatile, a big public show, perhaps.
And the children?
Tragically, the children in these families can easily get lost, sometimes escaping into drugs or alcohol just to cope with the constant drama and lack of genuine connection. Both the king and queen tend to see themselves as innocent victims in it all.
But they're not the real victims.
No. As Lawson states starkly, the true victims, of course, are their children.
And finally, the partner to the most terrifying archetype, the witch. He's called the fisherman. What's his role in that darkness?
The fisherman often had a difficult, maybe even sadistic mother himself. And crucially, he fails to see his own children's pain because he couldn't recognize or deal with his own childhood pain.
So he enables the witch.
He often does. He typically fears his wife, maybe fears living without her more, so he essentially relinquishes his will to her. He can become, as Lawson puts it, a blind accomplice to her malice. Sometimes he even blames the child for triggering the witch's rage, like Becky's father did after her mother slapped her.
So across the board, these fathers essentially fail to protect their kids, leaving them, as Lawson says, balanced precariously on the edge of reality. It really highlights how vital it is for a father or any other adult to validate a child's feelings and perceptions in these situations.
Absolutely. That validation can be a lifeline. And without it, children often develop what Lawson calls these make-believe selves. It's a survival strategy.
Right, because in a world that makes no sense, you create a character to navigate it, like in those fantasy stories we started with.
Exactly. It's a way to cope.
So it's a defense mechanism, really. Children of borderline mothers learn to hide what they truly feel. Lawson mentions how their childhood diaries might start with forced positivity, like, I had fun today, I am happy, even when it's not true.
Yes, that shutting down is described as an instinctual, almost life-saving response to these unpredictable tidal waves of maternal emotion. They become unconsciously preoccupied with constant risk assessment.
Always standing.
Always standing,
Right.
trying to determine their mother's state of mind moment by moment. Is it safe now? What's coming next?
And this connects to the concept of splitting, right? Which is core to BPD itself.
Yes, exactly. Borderline mothers often engage in very rigid all-or-nothing thinking. They project either overwhelmingly positive attributes or overwhelmingly negative ones onto their children. There's rarely any middle ground.
So let's talk about the children who emerge from the splitting. First, there's the all-good child. What does that look like?
This is essentially the parentified child. They're trained from a very young age to parent the parent.
Taking care of the mother's needs.
Yes. They become obedient, loyal, often functioning like a little therapist for the mother. Externally, they might seem very competent, successful even, but internally, they often develop imposter syndrome, feeling like a fraud, undeserving of any success.
Despite looking capable on the outside.
Right. They're often plagued by anxiety, depression, and a lot of guilt. Lawson calls it gratification guilt, that feeling of discomfort or unworthiness when something good actually happens to them.
That's so sad. They can't even enjoy good things.
It's difficult. They tend to be professionally successful, perhaps, but deeply unhappy in their personal lives. They might even have a subconscious fear of success. And if they had a sibling who was more overtly abused, they can struggle terribly with survival guilt.
The guilt for not being the one who got the worst of it.
Exactly. Lawson shares a heartbreaking journal entry from Joanna, an all-good child, describing her sister being maimed in what she called the civil war that raged behind closed doors. It captures that profound hidden pain.
Wow. Okay, then on the flip side of the all-good child, we have the no-good child.
Yes, this is the child who becomes the consistent target of the mother's rage, her negative projections, her blame.
The scapegoat.
Precisely. And Lawson warns that without intervention, these children are at high risk of developing BPD themselves. Their entire self-concept becomes grounded in self-hatred. They genuinely come to believe they are evil, or they might destroy themselves trying desperately to be good enough.
How does that manifest outwardly?
They might engage in more obvious acting out behaviors, things like drug abuse, running away from home, self-harm. Lawson mentions a patient named Katrina who referred to herself as a cancerous growth in her family. She felt utterly doomed for life.
That level of self-hatred is terrifying.
It is. Sometimes their artwork reflects this, featuring images like black holes or a black star, symbols of profound hopelessness and inner emptiness.
It's just a lot to take in. The depth of this impact is immense. But Lawson does offer hope, right? She talks about adulthood bringing power, a chance to change things.
Absolutely. That's the crucial message. Adult children finally have the power, the agency, and the freedom to work towards developing a reality-based relationship with their mothers. Or, sometimes, a reality-based separation.
It's not easy, though.
Definitely not. It requires letting go of those deeply ingrained, unconscious, conditioned reactions. And as Lawson says, that takes awareness, practice, and patience. It's a journey, often a long one, but it is possible.
And she outlines 3 essential steps for adult children trying to break this cycle. The first one is confirm separateness, using I am statements. Can you explain that a bit more?
This is really fundamental. It's about defining me versus not me,
Yeah.
establishing clear personal boundaries where maybe there were none before.
Okay.
So Michelle, an adult child of a waif mother, learned to calmly but firmly state her boundaries. Things like, I am not giving out my phone number while I'm on vacation. Simple, but powerful.
Right. Taking control.
Or Sandy, the adult child of a fearful hermit mother, learned to respond to her mother's negativity by saying, I am capable of deciding what is best for me. Or, actually, I'm impressed with successful people, when her mother would put them down.
Asserting her own perspective.
Exactly. And Ellen, daughter of a controlling queen mother, learned to say things like, you didn't ask me if I wanted flowers planted in my yard. Maybe you're trying to be helpful, but I am angry about this. It's about owning and stating your own feelings and reality.
Okay, so establishing the self. Then the second step is create structure, using I will statements. This sounds more action-oriented, like setting rules for interaction.
Precisely. It's about setting clear expectations and rules for how you will engage, rather than just constantly reacting to the mother's behavior.
Can you give some examples?
Sure. Michelle, the one with the waif mother, told her, if you call me after 10 p.m., I will not answer the phone. If you call me when you're drunk, I will simply hang up.
Clear boundaries, clear actions.
Yes. Sandy, with her fearful hermit mother, learned to structure their time together differently. Maybe planning meals out in comfortable restaurants, which relieved her mother of the overwhelming responsibility of hosting.
Taking control of the environment.
Right. And for interacting with a witch mother, creating structure often means maintaining a very deliberate, safe distance. Things like always driving your own car to visits, keeping visits brief, actively avoiding known controversial topics, and maybe refusing to be alone with her. It's about proactively managing the interaction to minimize harm.
Okay, that makes sense. And the third step, clarify consequences. This gives both people a choice, right? It's not about making the mother change, but about how you will respond.
That is absolutely the key takeaway. It's not about controlling the mother. It's about controlling your response to her behavior. Ellen, the queen's daughter, told her mother, the next time you imply that I'm not a good daughter during our phone call, I will hang up the phone.
So if A happens, then B will be my response.
Exactly. It gives the mother a choice about her behavior, knowing what the consequence will be. And importantly, it gives the adult child a planned, empowered response instead of falling back into old, painful patterns.
And for the waif, clarifying consequences might mean not rescuing her.
Yes, absolutely. Not jumping in to fix everything. Lawson uses this powerful analogy. An elderly man sees someone drowning. Instead of jumping in himself and potentially drowning too, he uses his sturdy cane to reach out and pull the person to shore.
You can help, but you don't have to go down with them.
Precisely. You maintain your own stability while offering support.
All of this setting boundaries, structuring interactions, clarifying consequences, it seems to hinge on something really critical for these adult children, learning to trust their own intuition again. After a lifetime of having it undermined, how do you even start?
That's a huge hurdle. Lawson really emphasizes this. Adult children must learn to trust their own gut feelings, their intuition, not necessarily their mother's version of reality. Especially, she notes, with the witch mother, who might manipulate with guilt, maybe casually mentioning she doesn't have long to live, just to pull the child back in.
Right. You have to trust your own inner compass, even when it feels broken.
It takes time to recalibrate it, definitely.
And ultimately, Lawson suggests that healing from that deep-seated pain, especially the hatred internalized from a wish mother, requires the actual experience of being loved.
Yes, that's crucial. Whether it comes from a therapeutic relationship, finding supportive surrogate parent figures, or a loving partner who truly sees and believes in the adult child's inherent goodness and worth. She mentions Primo Levi, the Holocaust survivor, finding profound healing through his wife's love after the horrors of the concentration camps. That experience of genuine, validating love can be incredibly reparative.
It's like it helps rewrite the internal narrative.
It really does. It helps reclaim your own story.
Which relates to this idea, Lawson presence, of living backwards. What does she mean by that?
She suggests that children of borderlines often can't really understand themselves until they first understand their mothers. It's like they have to go back and unravel the past, unravel the mother's impact to finally make sense of their own minds and feelings, which were so clouded by the mother's projections and distortions for so long.
So understanding the mother is key to understanding the self.
In many cases, yes. It's a journey of self-discovery that necessarily involves looking back.
And a big part of that journey must be challenging all those false beliefs they were fed for years. Things like, oh, your mother loves you deep down, or that's just the way she is, you have to accept it, or she didn't really mean it.
Exactly. Lawson uses this great little anecdote, James Thurber's The Unicorn in the Garden. It illustrates how society, often unintentionally, encourages children to ignore their own intuition, to tolerate abuse, essentially to betray their own sense of reality, to keep the peace.
Like the man insisting the unicorn isn't real even though he saw it?
Right. And the crucial takeaway Lawson offers is so simple, yet so powerful. Something is wrong if we fear the person who loves us. That fear is a valid signal.
It really is. And to truly heal, to actually rewire those neural pathways that got altered by all that childhood stress, Lawson stresses the importance of long-term therapy.
Yes, she sees it as often essential. Therapy can help create new, healthier patterns of thinking and feeling, allowing for a more positive self-perception and a less threatening view of the world. It's about building new internal pathways.
And the ultimate goal for many is to break the cycle, isn't it? To raise their own children differently.
Absolutely. To raise their children with genuine empathy, with compassion for their true selves, ensuring that this pattern of pain isn't passed down through another generation. Lawson mentions Harriet, a woman whose own mother was an unfailing source of warmth and light, as example of the blessed gift of motherhood when it's healthy. It shows that healthy love can be contagious too.
That's a hopeful thought. Which brings us to a final point Lawson makes about the courage to intervene, not just for ourselves, but when we see potential harm happening to others.
Yes.
Yes.
She tells the story of one of her patients who was in a grocery store and saw a mother really belittling her young child. And the patient, drawing on her own healing journey, gently but firmly stepped in.
What did she say?
Something simple like, "You are so lucky to have such a wonderful child." And then to the child, "You're a good little boy."
Hmm.
It wasn't confrontational, but it was an intervention. It shifted the dynamic.
Wow.
And Lawson's point is, we need to move beyond just asking, why didn't somebody do something about child abuse or neglect, and start asking ourselves, why do we often do nothing when we see it? It's a call to collective courage.
That's a powerful challenge. Well, we certainly explored the profound challenges, but also the real paths to healing when navigating these incredibly difficult relationships with mothers impacted by BPD. This deep dive has really shown how understanding these complex dynamics can be the first step towards freeing yourself from those inherited patterns, maybe allowing you to finally write your own healthier story.
Absolutely. So maybe a final thought for you to consider. Lawson talks about how even the smallest stream of light of love can revive a weary spirit. So think about this. What tiny stream of light can you offer, perhaps to someone else navigating this, or maybe seek out for yourself, to illuminate a dark corner of a life, maybe even your own?